I'm so thrilled that we are launching season 4 with a new author. But after this episode, I want you to share it. I want you to, of course, buy the book. And you know how we do. We buy 2 copies, one to own and one to share. We do not loan out our books. And then make sure you come back for the review of this book. This book is very timely because leaders tap out, and sometimes we don't handle that well. But what if we could manage our leadership practice in a way where we prevented ourselves from tapping out? We're going to cover that and a whole lot more, but I want to introduce you all to the author, Aaron Hinkston. This, you'll see. Just trust me. I'm going to bring him on right now. Welcome.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome, everybody. This is Aaron Hinkston, and he is the author of Don't Mind My Flags, When the Gift of Giving Leaves You Empty, a redemptive journey of restoration and hope. Now, at the onset, let me let you all know, this is a faith-based book. There is scripture in this book. There's scripture all throughout this book from the Bible, from the Christian Bible. But as we have done before, I want to make this very clear. If you are not a person of faith, if you are not a Christian person of faith, there is still much in this book to help and to guide and to inspire. And one of the reasons there's more than scripture in this book is because Aaron Hinkston gives us anecdotes. And so that's where we're going to start. Why so many anecdotes?
I mean, first off, thank you for inviting me to season 4. Like, to be, part of season 4. I'm so excited to be part of that journey with you guys. So thank you, first of all, for that. Secondly, anecdotes. I mean, I am a storyteller. And so I love the opportunity to take something that people may not get normally, related to a story that people would pick up, right? That would make it easier to understand. You could be like, oh, okay, now, and so that's what I really love about just leadership in general, taking ideas or situations and breaking that down into something that can relate to people's everyday life, because then now they can carry it on. And not only can they carry it on, but they can share it. They can share it in a different way.
I love that. Now we're going to take this book from the beginning and going to go through some things that I think stick out wonderfully for leadership. And then we're going to leave the rest to you all. Leave the rest to you all to buy the book and to read the book and to reach out to Aaron Hinkston if you have any questions or feedback or want to invite him to come and do some training to help our leaders operate on all cylinders. So let's jump right in. What is the leader's role in framing giving for the team or the followers? Now, giving, we want to apply broadly. So giving of ourselves, giving of our knowledge, our skills, our talents, giving of our time for those of us who are workaholics. No leader need to admit that. But how do we do that? What is the leader's role in framing giving?
I mean, it has to be a orchestrated balance, right? Because I believe if you give too much to one particular thing, something else is going to be off balance. It's just how we think we can handle it all, but that thought process is flawed. It's flawed, with a serious cut down the middle. And so one of the greatest things that, I've had to learn in my leadership process is how to not put all of my energy into one area and then have to come back and fix another area because I didn't pay attention to it in the process.
So good.
So, all of it my hand has to be on all parts of it, not to micromanage it, because that is an opportunity then for you to learn as well, to be a better leader. Because can you transfer the knowledge in such a way so that you don't have to be as hands-on, but you can trust somebody to run this portion while you build leaders in the other areas, right?
Yeah,
Because the main thing for me is, how do you take your situation and how do you transfer your leadership, your ability over to someone else so that they don't necessarily run it exactly like you, but can get the job done in a way that still takes care of the business.
I love that. There, so let's create a scenario.
Okay.
It is new hire orientation,
Mm,
and they've been brought on, they've met with HR, they've dealt with the benefits paperwork, and now it's time to introduce them to your team.
okay.
How do you frame your expectations? I guess this is where it might belong. How would you frame that for a new hire coming into the team?
So for the new hire coming into the team, the way that I used to do it, because I was in corporate America, I had worked my way up in management. And so at the base of it, I saw how I was brought in and then worked my way through those processes. And then so when I made it to that level, I said, okay, maybe I can do it a different way. Maybe there's some things that I can do. So what I'd like to do is I would take all of my management team and I would bring them to the table, right? As part of the application process, they will have met the managers already. So this is not the first time they met them, because we're going to build a team. The managers are going to have input about this new person, because we want to make sure that there's going to be some just some gelling of the entire team, right? So we're going to sit down now at the table and we're going to introduce our individual roles. And we're going to say, okay, this is my responsibility. This is their responsibility. This is their responsibility. And now this is what I expect from you. Okay. And we're going to check in every 2 months, through 9 months, so that we can make sure that we are meeting expectations, so that there's no surprises on the back end if there's something that we need to come back and deal with, right? And so almost at the beginning, we over communicate.
Mm-hmm.
We over communicate. We give them more probably, and they're not going to remember it all in that meeting. So we have to reiterate it the next day, and then my managers are saying the same thing that I'm saying, right? And then the coworkers who have already been through this process are reiterating that on the floor or wherever they are working together. So we're building this dynamic and this
Mm-hmm.
community where people begin to say, okay, I see where I fit. And if I have a question, I know who to go to with that question. And
Mm-hmm.
if I have a suggestion, I know that because I've met this team, I know that I could bring that suggestion to the table as well.
I know many of us are now wishing we started out in our professional working lives with managers like you. It was not that way for me. But what I hear you explaining is giving as an individual responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
giving as a form of collective accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you're building this dynamic, what we open the doors to is a healthy organizational culture.
Yeah. I mean, because my expectations as a manager was to transfer, right? And so if I'm a giver, you don't have to do it the exact way that I do it, but in your way, make sure that you bring that to the table,
Yeah.
right? Because this is the culture we're building. We're building a culture of sharing information so that we can all grow. If you want my job, I'm gonna show you how to get it, right? Because that's the expectation. If you want it, and I was in an organization that had, my position was in 500 stores. Okay. And so you may not want my position in this store, but what about the store in Dallas? Or what about the store in Europe? Right?
Mhm.
Because the process, the actual job is the same, but let's give you some tools so that when you get there, you'll be effective.
Well, this is a wonderful example of the leader member exchange leadership theory, where you create a type of partnership while still leading the team. You all look that up, leader member exchange. Okay, so then next page, y'all. I was charitable, but not responsible, resourceful, but not disciplined, generous, but not conscientious. In my naivety, I believed that giving everything I had to anyone who needed it was pleasing God. Y'all, y'all, y'all. Okay, so this is where we talk about boundaries. Say it out loud, leaders. Boundaries and priorities
Yeah.
and personal structure. And
Yeah.
if we expand it very generally, we end up at ethics.
Mm-hmm.
We do end up at ethical leadership. So describe the charitable, responsible, disciplined, well, the responsible, the disciplined, the conscientious
Okay.
leader. Explain how that leader empowers a team to be the same.
Yeah. I mean, I came to the table with, with guns blazing, right? And assumed that everything that I had to be kind of just emptied out, right, to everybody, right? All of my coworkers needed all of my time. My managers needed a weekly meeting because we had to sit down and I had to make sure that they were okay with the job. And is there something I need to talk to the store manager about on your behalf? And I was doing that so much that I crippled them from learning how to work through some of their own processes, right? Because I'm here to hold it all because I want to be seen as the best manager you've ever had. And so unconsciously, I had this idea that I had to do these things in order to be rated well.
Wow.
Right. And so that was on a lot of levels, right? It is personal, it's business, it's in church, it's in a whole lot of different areas. I was working the same way, coming up empty after it with not a whole lot to show for it, because that's not what they required. That's not necessarily what they needed. And so I had to deal with everybody on an individual level, as opposed, I was being selfish, thinking that that's what they needed without listening to really what it is, the type of leadership that was going to make them be better.
Okay, so now we have to jump ahead in my
Oh,
question.
my bad. I jumped.
No, no problem. No, this is perfect. Helping or enabling.
Yeah.
How does a leader tell which their actions promote? How do they reel back? How did you do it?
Um, when I saw that my I was in a managers meeting with my managers and my store manager at the time, and there was no responsibility on their end for what we were going through, right? We had some challenges. We hadn't met our quota. We hadn't met our points that we were supposed to meet every 6 months, every year. We didn't quite meet it. And so we had a rough year. And none of my managers took responsibility for that because they said, you did. You told us to, right? And they weren't lying, because I hadn't transferred. I was holding it all. I was taking responsibility for it all. And I wasn't holding them necessarily accountable for the things. I was like, oh, it's okay. We're going to work through it. And I wasn't holding them accountable. Right. So they got raving reviews while mine was subpar. Right. And so it was a kick, it was a kick in the gut that I had to recognize, Aaron, you're enabling them to pass the buck and not accept responsibility. And it's not for you to take on the full brunt of it when you have a full team of capable people who can
Mhm.
accomplish the goal.
That's so good. It's helpful. And I have been in that situation. It's more than just delegate. What you
Right.
just heard gets underneath why we should delegate. And so I hope this is resonating. How do leaders and teams set themselves up for disappointment when it comes to giving? I think you've hit on that a bit, but I'd like for you to extend it. If we continue with the scenario,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say you were very clear with the expectations, we cannot compete with someone's internal bar.
Right.
And so, what if the person is a perfectionist, not yet recovering, or the person is an overthinker, or the person comes to the table with high levels of anxiety and that need to perform. Like I can't lose this job. I can't lose this job.
Yeah, of course.
And
Right, right, right.
how does the leader in the team member, how do they set themselves up for disappointment?
Um, so setting yourself up for so to deal with that kind of anxiety that comes to the table, right? I think that's important that a leader can't be too closed off to the lives of the people that you serve
That's
as a
good.
leader. Okay. I think you have to be connected because I've been in leadership where, 9 to 5 is what you get, and I don't care
Yeah.
about what's going on at home. You have to come in and perform, right? But I think it's important that you're not, again, don't drown yourself in their sorrows or in the situation, but you have to be mindful. And for me, there was a moral thing about making sure that I understood what was going on,
That's
right?
good.
Because if I understand what was going on, then I can manage you. Maybe I can help manage you, maybe even through that situation, right? Because at the base of my Christian leadership, there's something else that pulls on me too in those situations, right? And I can't leave you out here in that situation and have an expectation for you to perform well,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Because then I've set myself up for the disappointment. Because without that if I have that expectation of you to pull and you're having trouble at home, or the marriage is crumbling right under you, and you're coming, this is just your getaway is to come to work. I've been in these situations, right? So how do we work through that? If I'm pushing you, adding stress to the situation, it's going to crumble. And I've set the system up to fail, right? And so that disappointment is going to be clear, right? Because now that's another stressor for you
Hmm.
as the person who had all of these issues already. It's another failure on your list, right? And now as the leader over it all, now I'm having to identify, okay, how do we manage through this, right? It's another issue. And I think in order to avoid those disappointments, the bigger disappointments. Now there are going to be some times where you're just not going to make it, and that's okay. But I think to answer your question a little better, I think you have to build in to the process that we don't know it all, right? We're not going to make it. It's not going to be perfection every time, and every now and then I like the idea of ready, fire, aim rather than ready, aim, fire.
Mm.
Okay, because we get ready, and if we're just aiming, all we're doing is preparing. And if we never pull the trigger, we never have anything, we never have a disappointment to measure from. But if you ready, fire, aim, you get ready, you see it in you pull the trigger, even if it's far to the left, now you can adjust. You have something to adjust to. And so that's what I like about leadership is the ability to shoot, be off target, but utilize that bullet that did hit somewhere as an adjustment piece.
I love that. I love that. So let's get into decision making,
Mhm.
because in all of these processes, as the leader who's driving it, driving the process, how important is the art or the practice of decision making for the leader?
The leader has to be intentional. I've been under passive leadership, and I can't just pass it off. I've